Hello BookTube, welcome back to my 2026 library tour. In this episode, a continuation of the history of the United States. Let's get started. So first up is Outside the Gates of Eden, The Dream of America from Hiroshima to Now by Peter Bacon Hales. So this is a history of American pulp culture from 1945 to the near present. It is very academic, very much reminiscent of a book that was written to be presented as, with the chapters being written to be presented in or published in academic journals or academic conferences. I deeply regret having bought this book. It is not what I was expecting and not what I wanted to read. I do have something of a sweet tooth for pop culture history or histories of popular culture, but I would prefer it not to be so academic. So this is a book that I really would like to see out of my library. Next is American Comics, A History by Jeremy Dauber. So this is more of the pop culture history that I'm into. So this is a history of American comics, both the comic strips that appeared in newspapers as well as comic books. This history starts off with the comic strip before mostly going into or focusing more on American comic books, particularly American superhero comics. It also touches on comics around the world, particularly the influence that British and French and manga has had on the American comic book industry and also American comic book fans. So this is a really good book on American comics. So the next batch of books are presidential biographies, except for Alexander Hamilton. But since he's by Ron Chernow, I have a bit of Ron Chernow grouped together. So first is Washington Alive by Ron Chernow. So this is a big biography of George Washington that at least Steve Donahue does not like. Next is Alexander Hamilton, with an edition that came out after Hamilton the musical started. So this is the biography that inspired Hamilton. I tried it a few years ago, about a decade or more. Did not necessarily get on with it, but I thought maybe having a copy in my library and giving it another go at some point would be more successful. Not that I've actually gotten around to it. I also have a Grant by Ron Chernow. This is another brick of a biography of a U.S. president. Moving away from Chernow, I have Thomas Jefferson Alive by Willard Stern Randall. A few by H.W. Brand, starting with Andrew Jackson, His Life and Times, which is another one that I had tried a few years ago and did not get on with, but wanted to give it another go. Not that I've actually gotten around to doing that. This is Team of Rivals, The Political Genius of Abraham Lincoln by Doris Kearns Goodwin. So this is a group biography of Abraham Lincoln and members of his cabinet that were also nominees or candidates for the Republican on the Republican side in the 1860 election. and many of whom also became high-ranking members of Lincoln's cabinet. And Kearns Goodwin makes the argument that this team of rivals helped ensure the Union's victory in the Civil War and made Lincoln's presidency a success. I have read this book, although not this edition. I actually read a copy from the library, and that was technically a Bell Redemption, if I remember correctly. But I haven't returned to this in well over a decade. Back to H.W. Brands with Traitor to His Class, The Privileged Life and Radical Presidency of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Have not read. Speaking of Roosevelt, oh, I forgot this one. Well, I'll get to that at the end of the American part of this shelf. So I also have the Roosevelt trilogy by Edmund Morris, starting with The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt. I also have Theodore Rex, both in trade paperback and then in hardcover. Colonel Roosevelt. I have not read any of them. Okay, and before I leave the history of the United States behind, I also have American Girls in Red Russia, Chasing the Soviet Dream by Julia L. Mickenberg, which I have not gotten around to yet. And it's quite probably one of those histories that I would rather see out of my library, particularly if I end up needing the space. So, next is Vietnam. So first is Road to Disaster, A New History of America's Descent into Vietnam by Brian Vandermark. So this is a history of the Vietnam War. I also have The Vietnam War Military History by Jeffrey Warrow, who is a noted military historian. I also have his book on the Franco-Prussian War. But I have not gotten around to this book, which came out last year. I think it was last year. And I also have The Road to Dien Bien Phu, A History of the First War for Vietnam by Christopher Gosha, who is a historian of Vietnamese history. So, The Road to Dien Bien Phu is about the first Vietnam War, the Vietnamese War of Independence from France. So, this book is more on the academic side of things. The history is broken down thematically rather than chronologically, and that threw me off when I tried to read it shortly after it came out. I picked it up from Princeton. I think I pre-ordered it. If I didn't pre-order it, I ordered it nearly immediately after it came out. And I didn't have success with it. And to finish this shelf off, I have two works of Indian history. First is Indian Summer, The Secret History of the End of an Empire by Alex von Tunselmann. So this is a history of the end of the Raj and of Indian independence. Have not read it yet, though. And I have Emergency Chronicles, Indira Gandhi and Democracy's Turning Point by Gyan Prakash, which I have not read. So tomorrow will be a bit more of an assortment of Western Asian history and Indian history. So look forward to that, and I will be back tomorrow with the third shelf of this bookcase. Anyway, BookTube, have a great rest of your afternoon.